Oh, welcome to a special episode of Guardians to Liberty slash Roads to Liberty slash whatever we're going to call it this week here. I'm your host, Mike Kniebel. I'm sitting in with the Guardians here, Nathan and Zach. We've got Dr. Kyle Varner on with us as well. I had been discussing a little bit online about how I wanted to know more about medical tourism and everything that it entails. And the guys were helpful enough here to sit down with Nathan and myself to ask some questions and kind of have these discussions. So, I'm just going to go ahead and start off. Doctor, my wife is a nurse. I've been telling her a lot about the stuff that you've been sharing, and we agree with what you're saying. But here's the thing: what are the steps that we should take to go down this route for medical tourism, like you're talking about? Because you talked about going to Mexico, some of these other places for procedures. I want to know how I'm to make decisions on that, when, and follow up here, like how do you feel about the cleanliness of some of these places compared to what we get here? Is it just stuff that I hear in the media is completely wrong about what the cleanliness is? Do I have to worry about that at all? So couple of questions that were just on my mind right away, but
Yeah.
I'll let you take it away.
Well, those are good questions, and those are really common questions. Everybody is in the United States somewhat indoctrinated with the idea that we have really high standards for healthcare. And actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. So the first thing I would say when somebody says, oh my God, how do I know I'm getting good quality care? How do I know things are clean? Or how do I know the doctors are good? So I would say, well, how do you know that in the United States? The answer is you don't at all, and you have no mechanism of truly figuring it out. Why? Because there's such a scarcity of hospitals and doctors in the United States that you're going to be seen by whoever happens to be on call at the ER that you go to. You're going to be seen by whoever is in network for your insurance or whoever you can get them in, and you will have essentially zero opportunity to vet that doctor and do your own due diligence. Contrast that to Mexico, where there is an active free market of cash-based doctors all over the country. There's not really a scarcity of doctors in the same way there is here. What that means is that the doctors are competing for your business. So here in the United States, for Yelp, for restaurants, we have a very active platform called Yelp. If you use Yelp for doctors, there are a few doctors like plastic surgeons who are on Yelp and who people regularly review, but for the most part, you can't use it to vet a doctor. Go down to Mexico, they have their own system. Doctoralia.com.mx is just one of the many that they have, but it's my favorite. And you can search for the type of specialist you want, the city you want, or the type of procedure that you want. The doctors are going to come up. There are going to be reviews. You can ask the doctors questions. There's a tremendous resource right there at your fingertips to read about somebody. And as a good consumer, you know who's good and who's not. If the guy has every other review as a bad review, talking about how he's a jerk, wondering if his breath smelled of alcohol, you probably shouldn't go to him. You can also, by the way, evaluate their educational credentials. And yes, this site is in Spanish, but Google has a little button you can press to turn a Spanish language site into an English language site. So that's the first piece to the puzzle, is that in Mexico, you actually have a choice because you actually have multiple people offering the same service and you can compare them. And there are lots of consumers out there trying to do that. And so what that means is that you have consumers actively engaged in the effort collaboratively in the same way that we rate every other service provider here in the United States. So that's pretty cool. So how do you do it? Well, you do it like you're buying a car. Medical care ought to be a commodity like a car. And so you start doing your research and you think independently, and then you go about purchasing the goods or the services that you want. I think it's really great, and it's intimidating to some people at first because in the United States we're not used to shopping for our care. But I promise you, it is a way better experience. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, how do you know if they're very clean? Well, I've never had any problems with cleanliness. I've had one major surgery in Mexico. I have had dental work in Mexico. I've had 2 EGDs or scoping procedures in Mexico. I've never once had any problem with the cleanliness. The gastroenterologist actually showed me around his office and showed me exactly how he cleans his scopes. So I had no doubts about that. But maybe what we could do here, if you want, is if anybody has an idea of a procedure they'd like to research, we could just do it as an example, and we can go through on the web and show exactly how I would do if I were having that procedure. Do any of you guys have any procedures in mind?
Well,
Actually,
my wife just had a gallbladder removed, and that cost a pretty penny here, and it was a pain in the rear end.
Yeah, I do.
How about that?
I was going to suggest the same thing, Nathan, because I had mine done a few years back, so that's
all right.
Thinking of like you.
So you need a gallbladder done. Usually that's not an emergency. Sometimes it's an emergency, but usually it's not. Usually there's a chance for you to get to the airport. So the first thing is that if it's an elective procedure, you have the option to pay cash in the United States. There's a place called the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, and they offer gallbladder surgeries, and they post their prices online. But now I don't really have the ability to share screens here. But if I just go to doctoralia.com.mx, and what city would you guys like to go to for your gallbladder? Does Cancun sound nice? Is Monterey, or would you prefer to go to Tijuana, which is the easiest access?
Well, let's go to Tijuana. I've always wanted to go there.
All right. All right. So if you guys are following along, I'm at doctoralia.com.mx now, and I'm going to look for Cirujano, Cirujano, General. And I'm just going to, and it comes up after I write Cirujanos Generales. And then I'm going to click on their map. And I'm going to kind of scroll over to the Tijuana area. Actually, I'm going to just type in Tijuana up here at the top. And now it's going to bring me a list of general surgeons in Tijuana. So general surgeons, this is kind of just something I guess you know if you're a doctor. General surgeons are all pretty good at an easy gallbladder. If you had a complex gallbladder, it'd be a different thing. But if you just have gallstones and need to have it taken out on a routine basis, you have so right here we've got 272 general surgeons who are all listing their advertising here. So if we just look at the top few, we've got the first one is got 14 reviews on him, and he specializes in laparoscopic surgery, which is what you would like. The next one down is Dr. Luis Gerardo Cano Santos, and he's a general surgeon. He does bariatric surgery, laparoscopic surgery, and obesity surgery, and actually he'd probably be pretty good at taking out a gallbladder too, because it's pretty similar stuff. But the next one down is general surgeon. He says hepatobiliary pancreas surgery, laparoscopic surgery, and he's also a gastroenterologist. Sometimes they have different training pathways. So, like for example, oncologists will be both surgeons and medical people. So they study surgical oncology and medical oncology, whereas in the U.S. we kind of split that apart. So they have a little bit of different nuances there. But just of the top three, I'd say this guy that does hepatobiliary pancreas surgery is definitely the one, because he's the one I'd go to even if I had a complex gallbladder. So this is the one I would go to for even a simple gallbladder, right? You want the best of the best, the expert's expert. You don't want to just go to a jack of all trades. You want to go to somebody who does this all day, all night. Right. And that's what, so I've pulled up, and I don't know if anybody's following along here, but I pulled up Dr. Victor Hugo Andrade Soto, Cirujano General and Gastroenterologo, on doctoralia.com.mx. So now I'm going to look at the very first thing. Before I look at anything else, I'm just going to look at the opinions. Now, he's got 16 reviews. And so the first review, they're actually 5 stars. Everybody's given him 5 stars. And I'll just read you some of the reviews. And I'll just translate them into English. So recommended the first visit. He assuaged my doubts, and I found him very nice. And the motivation for the visit was gastric problems. And the next one, it says, excellent care. They made me feel very confident, and little by little, I am getting better with medications. Thank you, doctor. Next one, his professionalism, care, security, and confidence to the patient. Immediate attention, always being there and in contact with the patient. My family and I have no words but to say thank you for your work well done. Recommended 100% with eyes closed. And then there's actually, this one also has something about how they could improve. Let's see, from my point of view, there is nothing that we can improve. So, and then the doctor actually responded here. He says, thanks for your commentary. The best is the satisfaction of seeing that a patient has gotten their health back. So this is kind of neat. There's this, so this guy's got great reviews. Something I would though, he's got reviews from a bunch of reviews from 2016, and then he's just got one review from 2018. It looks like 2017 was kind of skipped. Why is that? I'm not sure. But the next thing you can do, and this is where we're not going to be able to do it kind of in real time, is you can call or you can email. It's got his contact information. And by the way, all these guys speak English and have English speaking staff. And you call and say, hey, I have gallstones and I need a cholecystectomy. How much? And then you're going to start asking questions. Where do you do the surgery? Is that all inclusive? What if I have a complication? And then you call several people who you've looked at their reviews and found that has good reputations. You'd also probably want to take their name when you've narrowed it down to a few and go back onto Google, search them again, find out what's going on. You can click over to the Experiencia tab, which is going to have their entire medical school and medical training listed there. So you can, and you can read about the medical training. In this case, this guy has studied in France at the Universidad de Strasburgo, or University of Strasbourg. He's also an associate member of the American College of Surgeons. He's got like a lot of really good credentials here. So I mean, at first glance, this guy looks really good. And let me tell you something. We have just done more due diligence on this random surgeon in Mexico than 99.9% of Americans will ever do on the surgeon who cuts them open in the United States. And I would submit to you that means that you're probably a lot better off. Some people think that the hospitals in the United States and the licensing boards do a great job. I'm privy to information I can't share publicly that suggests to me that is not the case. And words speak more than actions. And I get on an airplane when I need medical care and I go to Mexico.
Yeah, it's funny because when you go to a hospital in the U.S., you don't really have a choice of the doctor you go to. Like you have the doctor that the hospital provides. Because I remember we went to the hospital here in Nebraska for my wife's gallbladder because she had an emergency. It had to come out like the next day, so we couldn't have jumped on a flight to go anywhere.
Exactly.
So it had to come out here.
The gallbladder like that.
Exactly. But when we get there, it's not like we could choose the doctor and do due diligence on them to do it. The doctor that was there did the surgery, and that was that.
Yeah. And to be fair, if you showed up in an ER in Mexico needing your gallbladder out, you probably wouldn't have much of an opportunity to shop either. It's kind of like if your transmission goes out in your car on a road trip, you don't get to shop around for transmission shops. But when we have elective procedures, we owe it to ourselves to shop.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you start? When did you start doing this? Is what I'm kind of curious. Like, you went through medical school here. Like, when did you get the idea that said, there's better places, there's better ways to shop for this? When was that first idea that got in your head?
Well, I didn't go to medical school here actually, so that's an important point. I went to medical school in Antigua. So I'm a foreign medical graduate, as are about 25% of doctors practicing in the United States. I didn't do so well in the education cartel pre-medical, so I had to go abroad. So I went abroad and did well down there. But then I came back, and I have always had tremendous problems with obesity, and really morbid obesity. And it was really a problem for me, a lifelong problem. And so I realized pretty quickly, as I got into medicine, that the data suggested I was doomed to a life of morbid obesity and to a short life. And I knew by looking at my labs that I had high cholesterol, that I had pre-diabetes, that I was just headed for like dialysis by age 50. It was bad. So I knew that I needed to do something radical. And so the first thing I did, because I didn't have a lot of money as a medical student, is I got together enough money to have what's called an intragastric balloon. And I thought, if I can lose the weight. So what this is they do an endoscopy and they blow up a balloon in your stomach, and they leave it there. And so they leave it there, and then you don't basically have any ability to eat a lot of food. And so I think I paid something like $1,500 for that. And this was right after my second year of medical school, right as I was going into my third year of medical school. And I went down to Mexicali, California to have that done. It wasn't FDA approved then. I think some versions of the intragastric balloon are FDA approved. I lost a lot of weight. It was great. And then the intragastric balloon came out and I gained, because it does, it can't stay in forever. And then the weight came right back as it was expected to. And, come to find out, the intragastric balloon, really, like, what it should be used for is getting someone ready for bariatric surgery. You put the balloon in, they lose weight, and then you take it out, and then you do bariatric surgery. That's probably the place it's most useful. But I gave it a try and thought it was kind of my last non-surgical hurrah, try to get the weight off. So then I went actually down to Tijuana and got it taken out. Came back to the U.S., had tons of problems with weight again, threw the rest of the weight back on and then some. Cholesterol is back to being bad. Lipids are, pre-diabetic again. And I said, well, I guess I need to do something more radical. So I went to Mexico again, surgery. And the interesting thing is I knew I needed to do something radical, but the American healthcare system would not have said so because I didn't quite meet the formal indications for bariatric surgery. And what I mean by the BMI plus medical just didn't quite meet it. So by the American College of Surgeons or all the American guidelines, they would say, no, you need to go. Or what some people do, which is gain a little more weight so you can qualify in the US. But at the time, the procedure was going for about 30 grand in the US, and I didn't have anything near that. But I did have 5 grand. I was able to scrape together 5 grand, and that's what my surgeon in Tijuana wanted. And I actually engaged the services of a medical tourism company. And what they did is they picked me up at the airport in Tijuana. They drove me across the border, or in San Diego. They drove me across the border to the hotel first night. The next day, I went and had my surgery in the hospital. Another night in the hotel after the surgery. They had somebody check in on me, make sure. They had a translator. I do speak Spanish, but they had a translator in case it was needed. Basically just to make sure that everything went smoothly. The surgeon was great, rounded on me multiple times a day. I've never seen a surgeon round on their patients that much. And interestingly, when I was at the hotel recovering, I met like 7 other people who had same surgery from other surgeons because it's a huge business down there, and it still is. So fast forward to today, I couldn't have done anything better for myself. Now, I didn't lose all the weight I wanted, but I lost a lot of weight. And so I was so happy that I was able to get what I needed. And this is other people. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of assholes who are going to tell you, well, why don't you just put down the cupcake? Why don't you just eat right? And they're jackasses who don't understand what it's really like to suffer from obesity as a disease. But I would just say is I'm so happy because I own hands and I made my life way better. Snicker at me for that. But, let them. I guess they'll just lay down and die rather than try to figure out how to fix it. But I don't do that. I'm very happy that I was able to do that. This is literally just 3 weeks ago. And I was having what's called odidophagia, which is where you swallow something and it hurts while you swallow. It can be a really dangerous sign of like cancer or other things. So it had me pretty worried. And so I work at a hospital. As you can see, I'm on duty right now. I asked the surgeon at the hospital I was working at the time to do a scope for me. And so that's the endoscopy I told you about, where they put a camera down so they could look and see. And so and then I went to the hospital, and they said if he alone was going to be, this is with a $65 pay cash up front. He probably another $1,500 for the fee for the surgeon who's their employee and the fee for anesthesia. Forget that. Hey, I went down to Tijuana and I got it done for $350. When I woke up,
you're kind of breaking out, bud.
Gastroenterologist. Yeah.
Your connection's a little shaky, so we're gonna give your mic a little bit of a chance to catch up. We did get our first question that you can answer here. Do you like pineapple on your pizza? That's coming from Lauren McKinnon.
In fact, I don't really eat pizza unless I am intoxicated. I wouldn't eat pizza generally, but no, pineapple on the pizza is immoral, and I think you should be excommunicated from any objectivist eat pineapple on the pizza. Ayn Rand, it's really a communist kind of behavior to eat pineapple on. So there are certain people in the LP who probably like pineapple on their pizza,
but only the commies.
Only the commies.
Silent.
Commies don't have any food. How would they know they like pineapple on pizza?
Yes, if they had pizza in the days of Proudhon, he would have put pineapple on his pizza.
All right, so I didn't mean to cut you off. It sounds like your connection is starting to stabilize a little bit.
Okay, good. So basically what I was saying is I had this problem and the hospital wanted to charge $4,000. So I went to Mexico and I just had it done for $350. And then I woke up and I had a biopsy from my esophagus. And the gastroenterologist handed me the specimen cup with the biopsy and said, basically, you can take this to any pathologist you want. I'm so happy because that gave me a lot of, well, who do you usually you just send it there for me, and he did, but I had the choice. I could have taken it anywhere, and that's the kind of choice that you don't get as a patient in the United States. And to me, I really value being in charge of my own care, and it's something we should value, but very few people in the U.S. actually value it because we're so conditioned that the system makes decisions for us and the system takes care of us. And we should be taking care of ourselves.
All right, so who's got the next question?
Okay, I want to know why this kind of stuff doesn't exist in the United States. Now, the perception of medical care in Mexico is very bad. Like you watch TV where people go to Mexico to get health care, and it's always dirty hospitals. It's always doctors who flunked out of medical school. It's all this stuff, and that's the perception people get when they think of medical tourism to Mexico. So one, why is that perception there? And two, why can't this kind of Yelp for doctors exist in the United States?
Is because of cultural reasons. We have this populist streak to us, our nationalist streak with these ideas of American exceptionalism that run through our culture, and we love to denigrate our neighbor to the south. It's just something we love to do. Look, they've had problems as a country. Not as many now as they used to, although they still do. And the truth is that most of those are our fault by creating the drug war, but not all of them. They've had problems with corruption and authoritarianism and poverty in Mexico. But we have turned that into a really vicious meme. And I mean, it's an American tradition to gang up on Mexico. Look at the president of the United States has said some extremely horrible things about Mexico. But if you go down there, you'll learn it's not true. And you'll learn that there are normal neighborhoods just like there are north of the border. There are normal supermarkets, shopping malls, movie cinemas. And these are normal people, just like you and me. They speak a different language, but our cultures, the culture of Mexico and the culture of the United States are so close as to be nearly indistinguishable if it's not for the language. And keep in mind, we have large parts of the United States that also speak only Spanish. For example, Puerto Rico, where I lived for 2 years, doesn't even speak English there. So Mexico's not this dirty, third world, horrible place where people are dying in the streets that it's portrayed in. It's just not. I've been to places that are really horrible. I've been to Western Africa, where you really do have people dying on the streets, and where you really do have that kind of grinding, abject poverty where nothing is safe and nothing is good because everything, the buildings are falling down. Haiti's a place where you have a big earthquake, and how many people in Haiti died? 100,000 people because all the buildings were built so poorly. Mexico has earthquakes that size all the time, and one person might get killed by a book falling off a bookshelf. It's not that kind of a country. So that's this really wrong-headed American exceptionalism that tries to put ourselves above our neighbors in a really nasty way. But why doesn't it exist in the United States? Why doesn't medical shopping exist in the United States? And I would say the primary reason is that doctors and hospitals in the United States have formed cartels. And what they've done is they've artificially restricted the supply of doctors such that the prices become so expensive that almost no one can afford it without their insurance company. And then we've led ourselves into this system whereby third-party payers control all the care and nobody shops. So we have tremendous scarcity created by things like licensure laws and anti-competitive practices of government regulators. And that's led to high prices, low availability, and consumers who are conditioned not to shop.
So you've been in the system for a while. Do you, and I mean, and talk with my wife and talk with some others that are also in the medical field and different aspects of it. They all say similar things, but do you see this getting better in America? Are we too far gone? Are we just going to keep moving towards a worse and worse system where we're going to have to look outside of this country for better care?
Yeah, I don't see large portions of it getting better. I don't see hospital care getting better in the United States. I don't see emergency care getting better in the United States. I see those being avenues whereby insurance companies and hospitals can really rip off consumers. And I think the forces at play will lend themselves to lower quality over time and will lend themselves to less patient satisfaction. In terms of primary care, if you're willing to pay for it above and beyond your prepaid moral hazard induction plan, which most people call your insurance plan, if you're willing to pay for it, you're going to get better care because we have this movement towards direct primary care. We have this movement towards telemedicine, and you're going to start getting even better care. So we've got kind of a two-tiered thing. If you're willing to pay for care on an outpatient basis, it's going to be a lot better as we go forward because we're going to see more and more market-driven processes. But if you need a hospital, if you kind of get into that area that's so cartelized, then there's just no way to Uberize it. So what I'm trying to say is that the direct primary care or cash-based primary care doctors are Uberizing medicine in the outpatient realm, and you're going to see tremendous disruption and improvement as a result. But in the inpatient realm, there's just too much regulation and too much investment required to realistically disrupt the system. And so it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Absolutely. And we're not going the route of deregulation either. It's just more regulations on top of more regulations. You know, I mean, for instance, everybody thought when the Republicans took the House and Senate and the White House that Obamacare was going to be a thing of the past. Nope. It's still there, and it's never going anywhere. Because once a government program's in place like that, it's not going away. The only way that it'll ever disappear is if the country goes bankrupt and we physically can't pay for it anymore. So that kind of stuff, that's here to stay.
Now, you know, when we talk about disruption, in my estimation, most meaningful disruption has a law breaking as a component of it. So Uber, for example, flouts the law. And, you know, if you want to look at, for example, medical disruptions like the discovery of H. pylori and that it was the cause of a lot of ulcers, which is actually what I had in the end. It turned out that I had H. pylori. That's what, and I just finished taking a course of antibiotics purchased in a Mexican pharmacy. They have cured me, or at least I feel like I've been cured. But so H. pylori was known to be a causative agent for ulcers for like 10 years before modern medical practice picked up the idea and started treating the ulcers and curing them. But a drug called Pepto-Bismol, I'm sure you all heard of it, also treated H. pylori. It wasn't as effective as a full cocktail of antibiotics, but it was known to treat H. pylori. So the guy in Australia named Dr. Warren had published about this. He did an experiment on himself. He was out there telling everybody these ulcers are caused by a bacteria, and everybody else was saying, no, you quack, they're caused by stress. And you just need to take Tegamet or cimetidine all day, every day. All the patients were taking that. So he came to the United States, and the media started paying attention to him. And what he later learned was that the media were paying attention to him at the behest of a PR firm. The PR firm was the PR firm that did work primarily for Procter and Gamble, who were the makers of Pepto-Bismol. Now, if you know anything about drug law in the United States or about the FDA, you know that it's illegal for drug companies to promote their drugs for an off-label use. So Procter and Gamble was breaking the law by basically funneling money through to their PR firm to encourage media stories about Dr. Warren's self-experiment and H. pylori. But what they did was they moved the needle and caused widespread public acceptance of the theory that H. pylori causes gastritis and ulcers. When they did that, a lot more people started buying their product, Pepto-Bismol. But more importantly, the medical community finally woke up and got its head out of its ass and started treating people the way they should be treated. So if this had been 1975 and I had had H. pylori gastritis, I would just be miserable, taking pills every day for the rest of my life with my stomach hurting like crazy. It would be crazy. But thanks to Dr. Warren and thanks to the law breaking of Procter and Gamble, I'm back to kind of a baseline normal health. So that's disruption. But the problem is in medicine, it's hard to disrupt. Why? Because you can destroy my livelihood if I break a law. You can take my medical license. The amount of investment and the amount of bureaucratic oversight and the way they can just crush you means that people are very hesitant to disrupt. You know, it's one thing to get somebody to drive a taxi or drive their car like a taxi, and maybe they're risking $100, ticket that Uber will pay for them. You can get people to do that all day long. Try to get doctors to violate the law. That's pretty expensive because we've got a lot invested in the ability to practice medicine. And so the cartel has a very, very iron grip on us. And so what we may need is disruption to come from people who are not doctors.
Okay.
Zach?
So,
I thought Zach had a question.
Oh, I forgot, and I think he kind of answered it already because I was going to follow up on the disruption. So go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I hear a lot of libertarians talk about is seasteading. And it sounds like a really great idea. You get like a cruise ship or an artificial island, whatever, parked in international waters where you're free from regulations, you're free from the laws of any particular nation, and you can just practice medicine. But it sounds like such a great idea, but it doesn't actually exist. There's no seasteading that I know of that actually exists right now. So I'm just kind of wondering, why is that? Why is it that this great idea I hear so much about that libertarians are always talking about, why isn't it existing in practice? Why isn't there some doctor doing research in international waters that he wouldn't be able to do in the United States?
All right, so the seasteads are expensive, and a business case can't be made to build one right now. Now they're working on an agreement with I think French Polynesia or something to have a special economic zone at a seastead. It's probably not going to be the libertarian utopia we want it to be, but it could be a good proof of concept. It turns out that building floating cities in international waters is no easy task. But they're working, so right now they're working on the technological things, and it might be a while. But look, why don't I have a ship where I conduct research in international waters? The interesting thing is I know a couple of crypto whales who have indicated to be interested in funding my activities doing this. But the problem is that if I do it, I'll never, ever practice medicine in the United States again. So I would love to have a ship in international waters, hire a couple of surgeons and everything, and start doing kidney transplants and start getting to work reducing the shortage of kidneys or partial livers, or doing gene therapy, or doing vaccine trials. There was this great heroic trial done by a company called Rational Vaccines on the island of St. Kitts, and they were brave enough not to use an institutional review board. And they got really attacked by this. But if you looked at what some of the patients say, they experienced some benefit. And what they were trying to do is create a live attenuated herpes vaccine. And I mean, you're talking about a major backlash. And actually, the only way this happened is because the lead investigator knew he was dying when he went into it. And now he's dead. And he knew that if he was dying, they couldn't do anything to him. And it was a great way for some people to put their finger in the eye of the FDA and their finger in the eye of the American medical establishment. And I would love to pick up that torch. And if I ever find out I have a terminal disease, I may do something like that. But short of that, no, because I don't want to be locked in a cage and I don't want to have my career ruined. And there are a lot of people out there just like me who are too afraid of the system to do the brave things of moving the world forward. But hopefully there are people who are risk takers who are willing to risk things enough. Unfortunately, people who take that much risk usually don't make it to this point in medicine. So, that's what you have to be, a risk taker, right? To be a disruptor. I mean, the ultimate disruptor so far of this century was Ross Ulbricht. And look where he is right now. You've got another great disruptor. What is his name? Colin, the Uber founder. I forget his name. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now on his name, but he's a very cantankerous guy. He doesn't ever play by the rules. He breaks rules and laws left and right and doesn't care. And now, actually, I think they booted him out of Uber. But, he would never... Travis, yes, thank you. Travis, what's the last name?
Kalanick.
Travis Kalanick, yeah. He's a rule breaker. He's a law breaker, and he can't really be at the head of an established high value company. But take anybody with a personality with less appetite for risk or more willingness to follow rules, regulations, laws, or conventions, and you would never see them do what he did. There's a certain part of regulation that is just of disruption that involves just busting the paradigm, and it's really risky. And you can end up like the Uber guy, or you could end up like Ross Ulbricht.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you see these people get demonized constantly for it, especially when they first start out. I remember Uber is still going through all kinds of regulatory nonsense in various cities all across the United States. I mean, fortunately, now it's an established company and it's incredibly popular. So there's no getting the genie back in the bottle. But when they were first starting out, every big city in the country was trying their best to shut them down because they wanted to protect their taxi monopolies. And Uber, yeah, they had to break the law. And they broke the law all the time in order to make this company successful.
Yeah, and law breaking is one of the most important things business people can do. Whether it's civil disobedience to make a point, or whether it is some type of strategic law breaking to achieve a strategic or disruption in an industry. And I hope we see more of it, and I think we will. There are some telemedicine companies that I'm going to be vague here because I don't want to out them, but there are some telemedicine companies, and I don't work with any of them, but there are some telemedicine companies doing this right now, and I believe their plan is to become large enough and popular enough so that eventually, when it comes to the powers that be realizing what they are doing is illegal, they will not be able to stop them. I think that's the strategy, and I'm not going to mention who they are, and I wish them all the best. And hopefully they change a paradigm in the way medical care is delivered.
Now, I was watching a video on Vice News earlier this morning, and it was about scooter sharing in San Francisco. It's this new concept where they just have scooters in designated parking spots across the city that you can rent for certain amounts of time, kind of like a bike share program. They got those all over the place. But the guy who was interviewing the CEO of the company that does this was asking him, do you really think it's more important to create this business than to follow the law? And I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, hell yeah, it's more important, because your law's stupid. Your law's telling people they can't ride scooters in the freaking city, and it's pointless and idiotic, and this guy is filling a market demand that people obviously want, and here you are scolding him because some idiot bureaucrat in San Francisco doesn't like it? Shame on you.
Thank you. Yeah, because there's nothing sacred about the law. The law is basically nothing more than a written threat from politicians. I don't know why anybody says that following the law is a virtue. I generally tend to follow the law because I'm afraid of what politicians and their armed thugs will do to me if I fail to follow the law. But there's nothing moral about following the law. Morality and legality are two entirely different concepts. And if someone confuses the two, I think that person is a monster. Let's keep in mind that in the 1850s, slavery was legal. Yeah, during World War II, it was the law that people of Japanese ancestry would go to concentration camps in the United States. Uh, I mean, how far do we have to go about what it's the law that these things that such tremendous injustices happen? It's the law that children and parents are torn apart from each other at the border of the United States right now. It's the law that people who want to pick our vegetables are not allowed to enter the United States. It's we could go on, right? In Saudi Arabia, it's the law that women are subservient to men. There's nothing sacred about the law, and people who worship the law need to go back and take a firm look at their understanding of the world. At the risk of offending a few people, do you mind if I swear on your podcast?
Go ahead.
Yeah, fuck the law.
This is the only law I need.
Well, not that book. That book by Bastiat is not to be sworn at, but everything else about the law is. It's a horrible concept, especially when you combine it with morality or you conflate it with morality. They're two separate things, and one is violent and evil, and one is very important to live with.
So jumping in here, we got a question from Tom. What's your thoughts on the $12 billion support that President Trump authorized to farmers to help offset the damage from tariffs?
I wasn't aware that he had offered an additional $12 billion, but I mean, it's interesting because the farmers in Iowa grow corn, and that corn gets fed to pigs, but the farmers themselves are kind of pigs feeding at the trough, aren't they? I mean, they're selling corn at below the cost that it costs to produce it, and then making up the difference with this subsidy. And in the meanwhile, what it's doing to the food supply in America is causing a diabetes and obesity epidemic. It's absolutely crazy. So I mean, we obviously need a free market in farming, and it would look way different than it does right now.
It's definitely a problem. Like you say Iowa, but Nebraska is the same way with corn and especially beef. It's literally the sacred cow here.
Yeah, beef is the cow.
Well, and somebody's going to come in and disrupt this pretty soon, because they're going to be able to grow beef in the lab, and give them 10 years, and the quality of beef you get out of a lab is going to far surpass the quality of beef you get off your average cow. And what then?
Then awesome.
Then we're going to have subsidies for cattle farmers, and they're going to grow cattle, and then they're going to shoot them in the head and bury them, so that they can keep the price of cattle up, and they can keep the farmers in business. See, this is the instinct of government. When a dinosaur industry that is bad for the world starts dying, the government will do everything it can to prop it up. Why do you think they give tobacco subsidies? Tobacco is, I don't think many people out there think tobacco is good for the world, but it's subsidized like crazy by the government even up until this day. So you've got all of these agricultural subsidies, and it's because farmers vote.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because Iowa is such an important primary state, everybody is tripping over themselves to make Iowans as happy as possible. And it's not just tobacco, sugar subsidized as well. It's one of those things. This tariff stuff is so stupid, because Trump is implicitly admitting that his tariffs are hurting people. And instead of just getting rid of the tariffs, he's now doubling down and just giving money to the people he's hurting. Like, okay, Mr. Fiscal Conservative Republicans, where did this come from? I thought you guys were supposed to be the ones who were saving the taxpayer money. Why are you acting like Democrats?
So let me get this straight here, Nathan. You're saying that government gets involved with healthcare, with farming, with things like education, and government makes everything worse? Well, this is shocking news to me here. I can't believe that as a libertarian, that more government involvement is going to make something worse. Yeah, I'm really glad we're having this conversation about the medical tourism and everything that's related to this, because while we were kind of figuring out the sound here a little bit with you, Dr. Varner, Dathan and I were talking, and I said that I had some medical situations with my children where we were able to actually pick and choose the surgeon and do some research. But we were discussing, like, when it comes to ourselves or our spouses, I mean, we really feel handicapped here, and it's because of the added regulation, the way the insurance is set up, and everything. And I've had this conversation with my wife, and she's like, well, why don't we do this, or we go outside of this rule here. She's like, you always hate these regulations anyway. But you hit on a very good point where you said it's these rule breakers, it's these people that are trying to innovate and go outside the system. When you do that, you get hit hard by the force of government. You get hit hard by these immoral laws here. So personally, I want to just say thank you for what you've been talking about here. And I've enjoyed even the episodes of this show that you've come on, you've talked to Nate and Zach that I've just listened to. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I'm really glad that you came on to talk about this, because I think it's very important and very helpful.
You're welcome. Thank you. I would just say about that one thing, the only good thing I will ever say about borders is that once you get on the other side of one, governments usually stop bugging you. Now, I mean, that doesn't apply to U.S. citizens when it comes to our taxes, but it does when it applies to our health. And so if you need to get away from the U.S. government, Mexico is welcoming you with open arms, and they're a great neighbor. And so I almost want to say build the wall to keep the feds away from Mexico. I'm just joking, obviously, but maybe Mexico will eventually be talking about building their own wall. Again, just a joke, but yeah, thank you guys for having me. I love coming on this podcast. It's like a wonderful time to catch up with old friends, and it's just always great conversation.
Yeah, I think this is the fourth time you've been on, so I think you've been on the show more than any other guest we've had. So
it's
that's
hard
great.
to tell because some of them have been for the foundation, and some of them have been for the podcast.
Uh-oh.
Well, it looked like he had to go, so
yeah.
We got a few minutes. You guys have something else you want to talk about? I know I have things.
No one cares about your things.
If you got something you want to talk about, just share it with us.
Where did it go?
So it's interesting that Mexico is a better location, to go to than Canada. We all know Canada's, the way their system is set up is screwy, but even just, I don't know, everything that he said, it was really interesting stuff, and kind of blows away some of the preconceived notions that you have about the system outside of this country,
Well, one of the problems now is that Mexico just elected a hardcore socialist to lead their country. So who knows how things are going to be looking there now going into the future.
So Ethan Legg has a comment here that I want to touch on. It's death with dignity, opinions. So we're having trouble. I don't think I can get Kyle back in because his stuff is going. Oh, wait. We'll see. Are you there?
I'm here. Do you hear me? Is the connection good?
Yes, good enough for now.
All right.
So we just got a question that you are perfect to take this. Death with dignity, opinions.
If you're in the state of Washington, I'll be happy to help you die with dignity if you meet the qualifications of the law. I believe very strongly in physician aid in dying. I think it's an option everyone should have, and I think it's a tremendous injustice that people all around the country and the world don't have it. There's no justification for the government coming in and telling people how to make their end-of-life decisions. This is an individual choice, and I find it really offensive when people cite their own religious beliefs as reason not to give other people freedom. This is a 100% freedom issue.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And, I would say, without having ever spoken to you on this topic, I think the rest of us are all various forms of what people would call Christians. And I still agree with that. I don't think that suicide is really a Bible thing personally, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Christian, but I don't think that has anything to do with it, because every individual should live their life according to their own values. It means if you're a Christian, you should live according to your own Christian values. And if you are a Buddhist, you should live according to your own Buddhist values. And if you're an atheist, you should live according to your own atheist values. There's no conflict there until we start trying to impose our values on each other.
Mm.
I mean, Christians should support death with dignity in the same way that atheists should support it, because it's all about people making their own choices. And I would say, from a Christian standpoint, St. Thomas Aquinas was very clear in the Summa Theologica that morality requires choice. And if you deprive someone of choices, you deprive them of the option to act morally. You cannot, simply because you behave in accordance with the Bible, according to St. Thomas, does not mean you're moral. You had to have free will, or you had to have the choice to behave immorally, and chosen of your own free will to behave morally in order to actually be said to have behaved morally. So even, great Christian theologians support this libertarian idea of choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't agree with you more. On that. I'm probably out of, I don't know, more so than Zach. I know we have theological discussions, but I agree with you on that. You in order for you have to have choice on this. You have to have these options available, and I'm so glad you used that quote. So I'm completely on board with your
I will take it, though. A lot of people in the left are going to be, cheering me when I say this, that end of life decisions are your own choice. But you know what else should be your own choice? How you spend your money. And when the left wingers say that people should have money taken from them and given to the poor, I say you're now trying to impose your moral views on others, and you're taking away their ability to act morally as well. So, I mean, I will give it to the left and the right here, because neither the left nor the right is really content to let people live according to their own moral judgments. Every side tries to impose their version of morality on the rest of the world.
So, from a kind of an ideological standpoint, because I forget who I was talking to about this, but someone tried to make the argument that by us advocating freedom, that freedom was our morality, and we were trying to force that on everyone else as well. And that argument didn't really, it seems really flimsy to me, but I haven't been able to work through why it seems flimsy. And maybe you guys can tackle that a little bit.
Well, freedom isn't a morality. What is a morality is nonviolence. And from nonviolence flows the ideas of freedom. And because you don't aggress against other people. And in order to take away someone's freedom, you must aggress against them. So, yes, I think that objectively speaking, it is immoral. It is always immoral to engage in violence against peaceful people. That's always immoral. If you disagree with that, well, I guess I would impose my morality on you, but only to protect myself or to protect an innocent person from you. And that's the big difference, is I would only impose my morality insofar as I would say, hey, hands off what's mine. But these people who have an agenda to impose on others would come up to me minding my own business and put a gun in my face.
Yeah, at the end of the day...
to me, it appears there's a difference.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the principles of liberty are all about living your own life and defending what rightfully belongs to you. We all have a right to our own minds. We all have a right to our own bodies. We all have a right to the product of both those things, which is our property. So the only thing libertarian ethics impose upon others is a responsibility for you not to impose yourself on us. That's the only thing that we demand of people. We just say, hey, you, don't aggress against me. Don't aggress against my body, my mind, or my property. Leave me alone. And at no point in time do we try to say, you can't do whatever it is that you want with your own life. So long as what you are doing does not violate the freedoms of anybody else, you can do whatever the heck you want. Just do what you want. Just don't aggress against other people. So it's not that we're imposing anything upon anyone else. We're simply saying, you're not allowed to impose on me. That's a fundamental difference.
Right.
All right, so
absolutely.
we're hitting an hour, and Mike has to go be a parent, and I have to go get ready for bed. So, Nathan, well, first off, Dr. Varner, thank you for coming on. Thank you for always jumping in when we have these crazy medical questions. Do you want to?
Hey, I'm always glad to do it. You guys are some of my favorite people to talk to. So anytime you call, I will be there.
And
Awesome.
so, real quick, how far along are you on your book right now? Are we getting close?
Well, we would anticipate publishing sometime in the next 6 months. We're very hard at work on it.
Awesome.
And the title, the working title at least, is White Coat Cartels: How Big Business and Big Government Collude to Rip Off Consumers and How to Fix It.
Cool.
So I'm hard at work on that book, and I hope everybody will keep an eye out for it and pick up a copy, because I think what I talk about in that book is going to blow your mind.
We will definitely be promoting that here and then on the foundation page and all that, because that's going to be awesome.
Wonderful.
Go ahead and send us home.
Okay, before we let you go, do you have like a website or anywhere that if people want to get in contact with you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, right now, I don't. My website will be launching in a few weeks, but for now, have them add me as a friend on Facebook. I still have a few spots left. So if you are interested in the ideas of liberty and want to be Facebook friends, please send me a request and we'll keep in touch. And then, of course, I'm going to have a website email list and all kinds of good stuff like that coming up in a few weeks' time.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. And for everybody listening, remember you can hear all our episodes on our website, roads2liberty.com. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We are on Minds. And if you like listening to our podcast, we're on SoundCloud, we're on iTunes. You can also watch the video on YouTube. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Varner, for talking to us. You have a good night, everybody.
Thank you and good night.